Good afternoon, everyone. I think we have got close to about 516 participants was registered for this session. I can see here now we have got close to about 233 participants who are registered, who have come on board now. And thank you very much for coming on board, and thank you for sparing the time. And welcome to MIM Learning Insights. It's an initiative by MIM to bring you the free weekly webinar series so that it enhances your learning journey during the period of MCO, CMCO, and now the RMCO. This is Sivanyanam, the CEO for the Malaysian Institute of Management. And today we dwell on the topic of corporate liability, and the theme is towards greater governance and accountability. Now, please allow me to introduce our distinguished and experienced panelists for the sessions who are from the industry, implementers, and key stakeholders in the area of corporate liability. As you know, the most pressing and important question that is being asked of corporate leaders today is, have you done enough to safeguard your organization from corruption? Indeed, today we are honored to have with us Yang Bahagia Dato' Lee Kim Miao, the Managing Director from Top Glove Corporation Berhad, Puan Nur Afisa Saim, the Chief Executive Officer from Institute Integrity Malaysia, and Mr. Jayanta Kumar Sengupta, Head of Community Relations Branch, Community Education Division, Malaysian Anti-Corruption Commission, in short MACC. And the fourth person is Mr. Silva Mutaya, Managing Partner, Silvaraj Mutaya and Company, and he is a board member of MIM. And to moderate the session is none other than Mr. Raymond Ram, Managing Principal, Grey Matter Forensic Advisory, Sendirian Berhad. We hope that the takeaway from today's webinar session sheds some light on the growing challenges for corporate Malaysia in combating corruption, and of course, the current trends and best practices in fighting corruption in GLCs, listed companies, and SMEs. So without further ado, it's my pleasure now to hand over to our moderator, Mr. Raymond Ram. Mr. Raymond, are you ready?
Yes. Hello. Yeah, thank you, Mr. Siva. Thank you so much for that kind introduction. And thank you for having us here on board today. I'm sure all of us, all panelists are very thankful to be here today, and it's a pressing topic that we're going to discuss. Before we begin, just a few house rules to be put in. First one would be, of course, you are to mute, but you can interact with us using the chat box. Please try not to unmute your PC or the device that you're using, because it might interrupt the panelists. We have 5 panelists sharing expert insights during the session. So we are actually trying to break it down to about 10 to 15 minutes a person and slowly go into the Q&A section thereafter. The moderator will collect comments and questions of Kate to share. So you can, of course, put your questions in the chat box, and we will try to post them or post as many of them during the sharing session at the end. And there will be polls conducted in between the sessions, or probably the beginning or the end of the sessions, by the speaker themselves. So feel free to participate in those polls, because information like this is vital for us to understand the industry and what's going on. Session also will be made live on the Malaysian Institute of Management's Facebook page, and a recording of this session will also be made available after the session for all participants, right? So I guess that's done with the housekeeping rules. Okay, so proceeding with the session today. Of course, before we begin, we all know that in 2018, the amendments made to our Malaysian Anti-Corruption Commissions Act, or the MACC Act, was crucial, and all eyes were on one particular section known as the Section 17 capital A. Now, what is this Section 17 capital A? It has now put in corporate liability, or given huge liability or presumption of guilt in some sense to directors and the company where a fraudulent or corrupt conduct or bribery is perpetrated, right? So here we have a list of a few panelists from different sides of the whole diagram. We have the enforcement, we have the government agencies, we have practitioners from the industry to give you insights on the entire paradigm of Section 17 capital A, right? So, and we often see that research has shown, even our CPI, or Corruption Perception Index, has shown that corruption is a huge problem in Malaysia, right? It has deterred that the perception overall is so low that it's affecting our foreign direct investments, it's affecting our daily lives as we go forward. Now, to give you a gist of what exactly is Section 17 capital A and why bosses, board directors, companies need to be afraid or do implement certain things in order to prove as a defense if something might go wrong, we have Tuan J or Tuan Jainal to basically give you a gist of what Section 17 capital A is and take it from there to advise on how to go about things moving forward, right? So Tuan J, the floor is yours.
Hey, thank you, Raymond, distinguished panelists, Yang Bapak Dato' Lim, Puan Nur Hafiza, Mr. Selvaraja, and Raymond, as well as Mr. Siva from MIM. Thank you very much, MIM. I think we should thank MIM for holding this very, very crucial and very, very important session for corporate Malaysia. Because as of today, as we speak now, everything is fully in effect. And we hope, as from the MACC, we hope that everybody is geared up and ready to be compliant. I would say ready to be compliant with 17A, and not so much of whether you are ready to face 17A. Of course, we do not want anybody, to be unduly implicated, because this is the time for you to take various measures, various etiquette procedures to ensure that you protect your organization. And that's what 17A is basically all about. It's to build a corrupt-free corporate Malaysia. It's to enhance governance. It is to enhance business ethics. It is to make corporate ethics as a new corporate culture. And at the same time is to make Malaysia's business environment corporate-free. And just like, earlier we had a chat with Dato' Lim, and you said, more towards, growing into a developed nation next. So what is 17A all about? So what is this huge 17A? Well, of course, it was introduced way back in 2011, 2012. And finally, it got sort of passed in Parliament in 2018. Right, and today, as of 1st June to 2020, it is fully in effect. So, which means right from April 2018 and 31st May 2020, corporate Malaysia was to prepare itself to instill the various etiquette procedures that would protect the organization from any possible acts of corruption which is committed by an employee. Now, this is something very, very important. So, which means that the entire responsibility of ensuring that corruption does not occur or corruption is prevented in an organization lies in the hands of the organization itself. But before going into 17A, just a bit of a prelude, just a bit of a revision of what are the various core offenses. Now, under the MACC Act, there are basically primarily 4 core offenses, as you see on your screen. The first one is soliciting, accepting, agreeing to accept. These constitute the offenses under Section 16. And must I say that and remind the audiences that all of this is material. For example, the element of agreeing to accept is something that is taken at every material time. So if there's a promise, if there's an agreement to accept a certain amount, a certain material, a certain gratification, as they say in the language of the law, that such receipts or such sort of gratification received or agreed upon, then at every material time can constitute an offense. So that's the reason why today you find somebody is being charged for multiple multiple offenses, and this is duly because there have been evidences to prove that agreements were made, offers were made at various times during a particular transaction between various individuals. So it is very, very important here to note that, because it doesn't mean that it's only at the time or at the point of committing the offense by in terms of exchanging the items, right? So even agreeing, so it can be an agreement maybe through WhatsApp, through a telephone, through just a conversation, and should we have proof of that, then at every single moment, at every material time that you have made those agreements, it will constitute an offense, and well, you can be implicated by law. Of course, the next one is, of course, the reciprocal of or the reverse of soliciting and accepting, which is offering and giving. Now, all these, I think I don't have to explain much, because this is something that you hear very, very often. You see it, not only in the newspapers and social media, but also in movies and so on and so forth. They are quite traditional, but nevertheless, they are evergreen. They are evergreen in the world of corruption, and these are very, very common acts that are common offenses that are always committed. Now, the third one is false claim. Now, false claim is something under the MACC Act 2009 that is basically saying that using documents containing false particulars to deceive the principal. So here the mens rea is, of course, to deceive, or the intention here is to deceive the principal from the actual scenario. And documents are fabricated. You get a bit of, you become, suddenly you decide to become a bit of a Picasso, and do some magic on the documents. So they are legitimate documents, they are original documents, but as it goes through a certain process, the perpetrator would then take the opportunity to make certain adjustments. So when those documents are fabricated and particulars are changed accordingly, and it goes through a certain process, that's when an offense under the MACC Act, under Section 18, is committed. And generally, we call it this as false claim, but basically is using documents with false particulars to deceive the principal. And finally, of course, is the using of office or position. Basically, in a nutshell, it means abusing power. Everybody loves to use this term called abuse of power, but power is under the MACC Act is defined as under using of the office or the position of a person. So when it comes to position of a person, is basically someone who has power, and someone who has decision-making authority, decision-making people who are in the decision-making levels, and these are the people who will be very much vulnerable, and people who would be at high risk of possibly committing such an offense, right? So these are the core offenses, and the penalty under the core offenses, basically there are two, and there's no choice. You can't pick and choose. It is just given to you, by the courts, which is number one, it's a imprisonment of up to 20 years, and it's it's basically you get sentenced into a 5-star facility or 6-star facility. It's a wonderful hotel, with all expenses paid. So if you do wish to try, maybe you could experience it, but our advice is please don't, right? So that's a maximum of 20 years. So it could be from 1 day to a maximum of 20 years, and a fine which is not less than 5 times the amount of bribe, or 10,000 ringgit, whichever is higher. Now here I must stress and make you understand that the law says it is a fine of not less than 5. And there is no limitation to it, which means it can go up to infinity. So if we get a crazy judge tomorrow presiding on a corruption case, he or she might want to, just put it to test and possibly implicate someone, or sentence someone with a fine, or it could be 5, 15, 50, 500. There's no limit to it, because the law allows for it. So in basic sense, these are the core offenses, and these are the penalties under the core offenses. And you'll see there's a bit of a difference between the penalties which will be introduced under Section 17A. Now, Section 17A, next please. So Section 17A, basically what does it say? Now it's an act, basically it's a very preventive act in nature. it is not as punitive as what you saw earlier under 16, 17, 18, and 23. Now, where you have a penalty and a fine. But under the 17A, there's a bit of a choice. The judge could choose either one. And basically it says what happens under the offense under commercial organization is that a person associated with the commercial organization now, which I will describe later, who are the persons associated, or what does it mean by associated persons now? A person associated with a commercial organization now corruptly agrees to give, promises, offers to any person, any gratification, right? Gratification here means any amount. It could be money, it could be position, it could be discounts, with the intent of, with the corrupt intent, right? Now, when that happens now, here under 17A, basically it says, what is the intent? Number one is corrupt. There's a corrupt intent to it, which means it is a reward or a favor to perform or forbearing to perform his or her official duties, right? So basically it means if the gratification is having an influence over your decision making. So if it does, then in an official transaction, in an official capacity, or in an official assignment, then what happens is that particular action can be, or sort of it's more skewed towards an act of corruption, right? Now, here, the additional intent here is to obtain or retain a business or an advantage to the business. So which means anyone and anybody within an organization that possibly commits an act of corruption in his or her official capacity now can also not only implicate themselves, but also implicate the associated persons and also people responsible or liable people. Now, the most important liable people I would share is basically the people right at the top management, the board, and so these are the people at the core level of being liable. Now, before I go into that specification, well, penalty under 17A is basically imprisonment or a fine. So imprisonment is the same as the core offenses, which is a maximum of 20 years. And the fine here, of course, it's a bit more. It has been expanded, but there's an option for the judge to choose either one or both. So someone could be, served a sentence or fine, or both, and imprisonment and fine. Now the fine here is, if earlier it was not less than 5 times the amount, now it's not less than 10 times the amount, or minimum of 1 million ringgit. Okay. Next. Right. So here is basically the landscape of 17A. If you are registered under the Companies Act, Partnership Act, Limited Liability Partnership Act, then you come under the ambit of 17A. And also associated persons, basically they are directors, partners, employees, and persons performing services for or on behalf, which means it could be your agents, your consultants, subcontractors, and so on and so forth as well. So your various adequate procedures later on should cover these various groups of people who are sort of linked to your official operations operation of your organization. Now you can be held non-liable if you can prove that the offense was committed without your consent or in connivance, as well as if you can prove that you had exercised sufficient amount of due diligence to prevent the commission of the offense. Then, should you prove it to the authorities later on, if you're implicated, then you can be held non-liable. The organization can also be held non-liable, and the group of people that you saw earlier, associated persons, can be held non-liable. So there is a defense, and the defense basically is if you, next slide please, if you can prove that you have also adequate procedures to prevent corruption. Now the adequate procedures basically is a principle which falls under the principle of trust, which goes under the acronym of TRUST, And it means various. So first one, T, basically it stands for tone from the top. R stands, which means the top management commitment. Now, top management commitment is something very, very important. Here, it also proves to say that today, top management cannot say or claim ignorance by saying, oh, I did not know what was happening, or nobody reported to me, and so on and so forth. So which means you must be all-knowing, because the top management and the board are deemed, or the analogy that I use is basically you are the parent to the company. You are the mother and father. So as parents, it is your duty to know what your children down there are doing. And you should be responsible for whatever that your children are doing. So that is the top level. And other than that is, of course, to give sufficient encouragement, to give importance to anti-corruption in businesses, to enhance integrity in business, to enhance governance, and also to provide sufficient resources, whether financial resources or human resources, to ensure that your anti-corruption agenda now is primary, as well as something that you need to look into very, very deeply. Next would be R, which stands for risk assessment. So here is looking at the risk of corruption from happening in your organization, whether it's your policy, procedures, or people. So you take an assessment. So you conduct an assessment of the various risks that could pose or could be prevalent in your organization and in your processes and your operations. And then you make an assessment of it. So first you identify, then you make an assessment, and then you come up with the various mitigation plans to curb this risk. So the risk also you could evaluate it in the sense of high risk, medium risk, low risk, and that's how you then work out your mitigation plan to sort of reduce such risks. You will be to undertake various control measures. So whatever that you have planned under your risk management, then you roll it out. You roll it out. So it could be things like, your various policies coming from gifts policies, sponsorship policy, conflict of interest policy, whistleblowing policy, procedures, and so on and so forth. And so these are all those things. So it's quite normal. It is not rocket science, right? So you can see it's a normal flow of management, basically. And of course, whatever that you undertake, it comes under S, which is a systematic review. So not only there's monitoring and enforcement, but also there should be systematic review of all your anti-corruption procedures, anti-corruption plans, anti-corruption measures. Because today's high risk could turn out to be a low risk tomorrow. Today's no risk could emerge as a new risk to your organization, depending on the happenings, within your business environment. It could be policies from the government, it could be from the regulators, it could be the activities within your business environment that could, at a future date pose a different or a new risk. And finally, T is, of course, training and communication. So it is very important that while you roll out all these plans, that you have cohesive and pervasive, as well as continuous and regular training and communication of all these policies and procedures, right? Only then. So it's not going to be something that, it's not a window dressing kind of an initiative, but something that lives and breathes within the organization. Like those days, some years back, they had the World Cup tagline, makan bola, hidup bola, tidur bola. So now anti-corruption should be that element in your organization. You should be breathing it, you should be seeing it, you should be living it, you should be, sort of basically hugging it, So of course, under MCO, we can't do all that, we can't hug physically, but nevertheless, in spirit, you should take it, and this is how you should prevent corruption from happening in your organization. Because should these things be followed, should these things be done, it is quite, structured. This will not only help you as an individual or an employee, but it will also protect the organization from possibly being implicated for corruption committed by employees. So with that, I think I've given you all a head start into the intro, and we'll come back to all this later on. So you have an idea of what is 17A, what are the penalties, and of course, how do you build up your defense? The defense to protect the organization, to protect the top management people, to protect basically not only top management, but every other person in an organization. So that, because what the law will take as, should you not have such adequate procedures to prevent, then the law will deem that you as an organization, you're condoning to corruption and you're allowing it to happen. And you can be implicated, and you could face all those a wonderful time, coming and visiting the MACC, sitting down with us, having a nice chit chat, sometimes with a cup of tea, sometimes with coffee. So it all depends, right? But the journey is never easy. So like they say, prevention is better than cure. Thank you, Raymond.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Tuan Jay. All right, I think we have a short poll to be done. If we can have the poll up, please. Can have the poll to be shown up on the screen. Yeah, so please, all participants are invited to participate in this poll so that we can grasp into the understanding of Section 17A. And then we will see the results right after the poll. You have about 10 to 30 seconds to answer this starting from now. Is the poll posted up yet? Okay, so these are the results. I guess the poll was on the Section 17A provision is meant to enhance accountability, governance, and business integrity. What is your opinion on this provision? I guess most of us equally agree that it's about time Malaysia has such provisions. It's about time to hold those at the top accountable for things that go on within the organization, right? Even for me,
thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yes. Okay. Even for me, even when we go and do consultancy work before this, when we are called in to do training, for example, anti-fraud and things like that, the first thing that we ask our clients is what happened, because they are more reactive. They only call for trainings and whatnot when there's an incident that takes place within the organization. They have dismissed the staff and things like that. Now, with this Section 17 capital A, you must already have controls, because senior management, board directors can be held liable for actions of their bottom line, for the actions of their staff. Now, if a staff is implicated, the senior management cannot just say, look, I didn't know about it, I had no intention. No, you have two things you must prove, like how Tuan Jay has already explained earlier. First thing, you got to first prove that you had nothing to do with it, you have no intention. Number two, you must prove that you have taken enough actions or have adequate procedures to show that you have done your best to avoid such things from taking place. Now, if you can't prove both of this, you can still be held strictly liable for the offense, right? Okay, so moving forward, we have, of course, we have seen Top Glove perform in many areas. For me, because in my capacity as Secretary General of Transparency International itself, we have seen Top Glove evolve in the sector of integrity. They have practiced integrity and uphold the culture of integrity within the organization. You can actually feel it when you walk into the building. For me, when I first walked into Top Glove, first thing I saw was, look, this is our whistleblower hotline. This is no nonsense. Make sure that we don't practice or don't condone to any corrupt or non-integrity-wise actions, right? So Top Glove has created a climate of integrity to some extent. And we are proud and happy today to have Dato' Lee with us to share on his experience on how this corporate culture was created and how integrity is being upheld at top level. So Dato' Lee, the stage is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Raymond, for your kind words. Distinguished panelists, Puan Nora Fiza, Tuan J, Mr. Selvaraja Mutaya, and CEO of MIM, Mr. Siva Ganam, and all participants of this live webinar. I'm very pleased to share with you what Top Glove has done over the years to improve ourselves in this area. And if you look at my next slide, there is a slide on what we do every day. You see that we call it the Top Glove Business Ethics Club. So if we have 5 meetings in a day, we'll be clapping 5 times to remind ourselves on the importance of honesty, integrity, and transparency. And something akin to the Japanese culture of having a good start for the morning before we commence work. And at the end of the meeting, you usually have another clap. We call it the top safety clap, followed by a resounding improve, improve, and improve. Again, to remind us that we need to take care of safety, we need to improve every day in all the areas that we need to. So my presentation for today, if you look at the summary, the next page, is basically to run you quickly through some of the topics like how do we get started and why must we do so, and what are the things that we should do, who should we work with, and when to implement the integrity culture, where do we go from here, and most importantly also our corporate values, we call it RIVER, and a concluding note to share with everyone on the importance of integrity. If we look at the next page, talking about how do we get started, you see that we started quite some time ago in 1998, which is close to 22 years. So at that time, we took action on a director of Top Glove that was involved in a cheating case. So even from the early days, you know that we do not tolerate corruption or abuse of power by our senior staff. And in 1999, we talk about a classic European case asking us to pack lesser gloves into the box in order for them to cheat their customers. We said no to them, and we felt that at the time we did the right thing. Most good companies should do. And in year 2000, we were also very patient in our company listing, not wanting to engage runners or brokers that promise guaranteed approval for us for a sum of money. We didn't want to do that. We felt that we must earn on our own merit. And even after listing, we did not succumb to the temptations of the stock market syndicates. And most importantly, in year 2006, we were inspired by the PDRM's anti-corruption badges that you could see being pinned on to their shirt. And that got us very excited. And we immediately implemented the badge that we have at the moment, which is what I have here, the integrity badges. So we have not looked back since then, and we have continued to wear this badge to remind us every day on the importance of integrity. And in the year 2008, we also established the Anti-Corruption and Prevention of Corruption Committee. And we also inspired by Warren Buffett's thoughts on hiring to talk about high intelligence, high energy, and high integrity. And most importantly, in the year 2017, we were the first private company that was certified with the ISO 37001 ABMS system, with us taking an active part to improve this program as we move on. The next page, page number 5, we talk about why must we embark on this journey. I think the realization comes from the company, and particularly the tone from the top, to say that we need a strong foundation for a lasting business, and we need to gain trust and respect from the stakeholders in the industry. We also need to create a healthy business environment so that everybody could compete on a fair and level playing field. And most importantly, also to become a responsible corporate citizen, to do our part to ensure that Malaysia become a developed nation on a faster basis. On the next page, we talk about what more must be done by us. So this is where we continue to strengthen the conduct from the top. We restructured our anti-corruption unit. We continue to wear the badges, and we engage all the stakeholders in the ecosystem, and we step forward to sign the IBR with MACC, and we also engage FMM and also other parties, and even Institute Integrity Malaysia. We are a big fan of theirs, same as we are a big supporter of MACC, Transparency International, and also we are very actively involved in the BIA, which is the Business Integrity Alliance. So I have to thank Tuan J for causing us a lot of uneasiness before June 1st. We were so worried that the implementation of the act would be postponed. So like everyone else, we got into action. We engaged the government, and we are thankful that the government listened to the views of all the important crusaders and all the important supporters of anti-corruption to come forward to say that Malaysia must not delay this act anymore, this new section. We have to go ahead, because 2 years' time is a long enough time for everyone to get ready. So it's not good to delay. By delaying, we will set us backwards. So thank you to Tuan J and MACC for moving on with this important, very important provision. And for us also, we continue to strengthen our whistleblowing policy. In fact, recently we have engaged a third party to be the whistleblowing unit, which is engaged by Top Glove, which I think is better than a whistleblowing unit inside Top Glove itself. So that would leave the independence in a very high level if we engage somebody outside, an auditor, to do it. We also implemented the no-gift policy and strengthened our employee code of conduct. And we increased the number of full-time staff in the integrity unit. The next page talk about who should we work with. I have mentioned a few names in our ecosystem, and a lot of NGOs, our government, our society, all getting together to take collective action in this very important area. The next slide, page 8, you will see the collective action that we have taken to date with various parties, with the customers, employees, suppliers, bankers, competitors, as well as with Transparency International, Business Integrity Alliance, BEIM, and also business councils, associations. And for the government and GLCs, we have engaged MACC very actively. We thank them for coming over to our tower in Shah Alam to share with us on the implementation of Section 17A. And we also work closely with Institute Integrity Malaysia, SIRIM, Securities Commission, Bursa Malaysia, and many of our suppliers, the media, especially suppliers in our supply chain. We have continued to share with them on the importance of anti-corruption. We have sent those badges I mentioned just now. The badges that we wear, we continue to send them every year. And we also send them the letter to declare that they support us in anti-corruption and etc. The next page, on page 9, we talk about when to implement the integrity culture. This is something I agree with Tuan J, that you have to practice it every day. We are also a strong believer to say that you have to keep it alive. Integrity, you have to talk about integrity every day. You have to share it. You have to practice it. You have to care about it in order for it to survive. Otherwise, something that is talked about and for a long time you don't talk about it, you will not have a chance to flourish. So we talk about it during recruitment time. We make it clear to the recruits that we take in that integrity is a very strong pillar in our system. We do the ethics clap like I shared with you just now during meeting time. And we do a lot of sharing in our auditorium for new graduates as well as suppliers. We hold town hall sessions to inform them on how important it is for us on anti-corruption. We also continue to deal with a lot of stakeholders, and we continue to get updates from MACC. We support MACC's good effort and the Transparency International's programs as well. And we also display our anti-corruption badges and policy very actively. We look at the next page, page 10. Where do we go from here? We would like to expand the scope of our ABMS to all the factories in Malaysia, as well as our factories in Thailand, Vietnam, and China. And we also would like to continue to work with the government via the PDRM, MACC, IIM, BIA, and etc. And we continue to remind ourselves and our colleagues on the consequences of bribery and advantages in combating corruption all the time. And we do the ethics club, and we continue to strengthen our culture of integrity. And about 2 years ago, we came up with this Top Gloves River corporate values, of which the I in the word river stands for integrity. The next page, on page 11, we talk about benefits of the ABMS. As you could see, a lot of benefits. You gain respect, you attract good suppliers and employees, you get support from your customers, and you have higher morale among the employees, suppliers, and most importantly, also employees learn to make good decisions and good values. And also business become much better, because businessmen will know that there are only 3 factors that we look at. The factors are basically, we look at their quality, we look at their pricing, we look at their service. If they are good in these 3 areas, they qualify to be a strong supplier of Top Glove. Next page, for page 12, we talk about the anti-bribery and anti-corruption policy. We have a zero tolerance. We continue to improve, and we felt strongly that we have to comply with local and foreign laws. So we make it very clear to our 6 factories overseas and our 3 foreign sales officers that we do not tolerate corruption, and we believe in doing more in this area. And page 13, we talk about some of the initiatives that they have. You could see that on the top there is a wording called integrity letter. So we got our suppliers to sign this letter. We call it the LECC. We got them to sign it every year to reinforce their pledge that they support us in this anti-corruption exercise. And further down, you see the anti-corruption badge that we wear every day. And even at our guard house, the picture in the middle, you see we have the badge displayed very prominently. And even in the yellow vans that you see on the street, yellow and blue color vans, you see the badge being displayed prominently at the back. And the next page, 14, we talk about initiatives. The first picture talk about our office room, very transparent. That by the way, is my room, you know, so no closed doors. Everything is very transparent. Lots of eyes outside are looking at me. So I have to be mindful to do the right thing, to do the right things all the time, and seem to be doing the right thing all the time as well. We do that during recruitment time, sharing time, lunch time, dinner time. We put a badge just next to their fork and spoon to remind them. And we even have the integrity run event. Okay, the next page, 15. This is our river value. We talk about respect, integrity, value, empowerment, and relationship. So we practice it every day, and we have KPIs that encourage us to practice these values every day. And on the final page, okay, the next page, we talk about the clap that I mentioned just now about top safety, top safety, top safety. 3 claps, 2 claps, and 2 claps, followed by improve, improve, and improve. So thank you very much. Happy to share with you.
Thank you so much, Dato' Lee. That was an insightful explanation of how the corporate culture is actually built. But what the main key takeaway I see in the whole presentation is culture of integrity is a continuous agenda. It's not a one-time thing where someone just puts in processes, SOPs, and not look at it again, right? And Top-Glove has done a very good job in continuing the whole process, in moving towards the right direction. And this, of course, brings in the whole adequate procedures guidelines that have been talked about earlier by Tuan J, brought up, right? Also, I'd like to share, when we talk about anti-fraud and corruption, during my studies as a fraud examiner, they always told us that the best way to deter fraud is to create the perception of detection, right? When you say perception of detection, meaning people believe that if they do something wrong, they will be caught and penalized. Not that, oh, if there's something small, you will say, it's okay, next time please don't do it. No. If you do something wrong, you will be caught somehow and you will be penalized, and this will be made an example to all your staff. That also enhances the culture of integrity and stops people, deter people from going towards the wrong direction, right? So that's a very good explanation, Dato' Lee. Thank you so much. Now let's move towards our legal practitioner, our legal expert, on his thoughts on international laws that's related to Section 17A. Of course, us being a Commonwealth country, we took a very much similar approach like the UK Bribery Act, Section 7 of the UK Bribery Act. But he will speak about a bit of the UK Bribery Act, a bit about the FCPA, and also go into risk assessment done in companies and how those risks that have been identified goes into creating policies and whatnot in order to perform adequate procedures in the Section 17A. Right? So, Mr. Selva, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you, Ram. Good afternoon, Dato'. Good afternoon, panelists, Tuan J, Tuan Norafiza, and Mr. Siva. My name is Selvaraja. We're talking about navigating the waves of corporate liability. This issue of corporate liability is maybe very new to Malaysia, because we are talking about criminal liability, where the law now focuses on criminal actions rather than what you call only civil actions. So internationally, this has already been there. The first slide, please. The first law to came about in this area of jurisdiction is the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act 1977 by US government. So way back of something like 40 years ago, they already implemented the law. But that law was mostly focused on foreign officials. What do you mean by foreign officials is those officials in countries where they are in charge of making the law or the administrative or the judicial position. So these people are being bribed to award contracts, tenders, or to award projects. So that FCPA law by US was a prelude to many other laws to come about later. That law made sure that the fines are hefty, the sanctions are hefty for companies to pay. So if any American company or US-based company, whether it's registered in US or it is a local subsidiary in any country, it will be what you call have to implement that law. I.e., if it, let's say Microsoft or Google, you have a Malaysia, Google Malaysia Sdn Bhd. So the Google Malaysia Sdn Bhd is equally liable under the FCPA. It is just because it's a Malaysian company doesn't mean that it is not liable. That's a corruption in Malaysia. Or if it is, let's say, an American company registered in India or China, that company, American company, will be liable to under the law. And the punishment will be meted out to the corporate company, which is listed in US. And the punishments are hefty, always in hundreds of millions or billions. So the question some of them have posted, is the parent company liable? The FCPA makes the parent company liable. So it doesn't matter that the company is operating in some remote countries. The parent company invariably will be liable and will be sanctioned in US. For that purposes, all American companies, whether owned or registered in US or owned elsewhere, is responsible to ensure the law is complied with. So those employees working in an American company, you will know that you have to practice this law very stringently. The code of conduct, the code of ethics, the gift policy, the whistleblower provisions, all are very stringently followed. Otherwise, your corporate company will be penalized. Coming to the extension of this law came to UK, UK Bribery Act. But before even UK Bribery Act came into place, the United Nations took a more stringent role in this matter, where they developed the Convention for Combating Corruption. So in 2005, they implemented this international treaty among member states, i.e. all the countries in the world, that 140 countries in the world. There are about 20 didn't sign this treaty. The rest have signed up the treaty, i.e. these countries will eventually have implement some form of law or legislation that to ensure the corrupt practices are limited or restricted or eliminated. So UN came up with this international treaty in 2005. Then the OECD, which is the European counterpart, they developed another international treaty, which is largely signed by the 36 countries in Europe. But member countries who are dealing with Europe, that about 40 over member countries who are dealing with Europe, they also pledged to follow the European legislation. Based on that, the UK Bribery Act 2010 came in, which applied to all UK registered entities, whether locally in UK or overseas. So if you look at the trend, the law is now extra jurisdictional, i.e. it doesn't only apply within the country, it applies internationally. The same MACC law also provides the same thing. Whether a foreign company operating in Malaysia or Malaysian company operating elsewhere is bound by the law. There's no difference. So let's say a Malaysian company operating in Hong Kong and provides a bribe or some advantage or some kind of facilities or facilitation payments or commission, you are still caught. You cannot escape saying that, oh, that is done in another jurisdiction. So these laws are coming in as extra jurisdictional. And of course, the UK Bribery Act introduced this concept of adequate procedures, which Mr. Anjay talked about. Whereas the US law didn't discuss about adequate procedures. They didn't have a defense mechanism. If you are caught, you're caught, and the company is punished heavily for such a bribe. But the UK Bribery Act says that, oh, you can have a set of framework, and if you implement this framework, the court may look at it leniently against you, saying that you have done what is required under the law, and the bribery still happened. Then you may get acquitted, maybe the fine is reduced, whatever. But the process must be there. So by and large, the international scenario is already pushing Malaysia to have this law in place. It is not something Malaysia created yesterday, So the question some of them posted in the news, in here and elsewhere, this law is too extensive, too highly criminal, making directors and what you call principal shareholder, principal officers, even employees go to jail for other employees' conduct. That's the difference in this law compared to the FCPA. In Malaysian law, you as a manager or a supervisor who are supposed to undertake the due diligence, which Mr. Tanjay talked about. If you are supposed to undertake the due diligence and you didn't do it, and you are what you call susceptible to some kind of action, because in the court you have to prove that you have to prove, not MACC has to prove. You have to prove that you did something. You did something to control the corruption, to prevent the corruption. So that's a part where the Malaysian law differs from the international scenario more. Here, the balance of probability of proof is moved from the law enforcer to the operator of the business. Okay. So move to the next slide. Let's look at what the companies have done internationally, globally. Because my experience with Fortune 100 companies, they have stringent requirements on this process. So what do they normally do in a company? I have tried to focus it on SMEs in Malaysia because this law seems to be a bit gigantic and overbearing for some of these small companies, small and medium companies. So normally what you expect to do some kind of situation analysis and risk assessment of the bribery risk in your respective organization. How do we do it? A simple exercise is you scope your business. What are the key vulnerable areas in your business? If you are a construction company, it's in project management. If you are in a company where you are handling tenders and contracts, is procurement management. If you are a warehousing company, is in your inspection. The risks are in these areas. In a warehousing company, is where inspection, asset control, administration. That's where the focus will be. Or if you are what you call a marketing company, the risk is in the sales, because by commission, facilitation payments, these are things where the risk is. So you have to look at what type of business you are in and what's the complexity of your business. Are you in geographically spread out all over Malaysia, ASEAN, worldwide? So your risk is wider. Your opportunity for corrupt practices is bigger. And depending on the nature of the business, the complexity of the business, and the industry you're in, you have to do the risk assessment. And you can scope your business. I mean, not necessary that you must come up with all the 45 procedures within 1 year. You have to do a step change. You have to see where the low-hanging fruits are. In the industry, we call it low-hanging fruits. Where are the immediate areas where you can pluck this risk? You have to analyze those risks, identify those risks, and prioritize it. Because within a period of 6 months, 9 months, or 12 months, you can't cure all the risk. You have to strategize that, because you need time to actually the law gave 2 years. 2018, the law was passed, and sort of MACC given Malaysian companies, the 4 to 5 million companies registered under ISSM, they gave them 2 years. But I think many of them just starting now. So actually it's a bit 2 years late. But that's how the industry is. So having a situation analysis, leveraging on your vulnerable risk and areas of focus within the company, then you move to what do you do? Now you've got a list of risk, identified the areas, and you prioritize the risk according to high risk, medium risk, low risk. What do you do now? You look at your policy procedures. Many companies have policy and procedures. Many of it are parked in the shelf or in the cabinets. But this law, it requires the procedures to be live in the system. So every day you come in, you have to implement the policies, procedures, because things can go wrong. It is not an ISO procedure where you put into the shelf after getting the certification and forget about it and do the way as normally you do. So in this case, you have to make the policy procedures in terms of monitoring and reporting. You have to make it live. i.e. it is an online system, either the ABMS system or a management system or some SAP, Oracle, any system with the market will give you, transfer the policy procedures into a system where you can monitor it and you can key in the details. So at any single point of time, you must be able to get the data out of the transaction. So if you can get the data out of the transaction, the opportunity for the risk to happen is reduced. Opportunity for the risk to take place is reduced. Like say in a tendering process, if the tender document, floating the tender document, receiving the bids, evaluating the bids, all are done in the system, not in the paper format, that at any single point of time, any manager can go into it and key in looking for the information. And it is auditable, traceable. In that way, the opportunity to manipulate the process is reduced. If it is a paper trail, you can exchange the papers. You can delete, or you can crush the papers or shred the papers. But if it is in the system, it's impossible to manipulate the process. So that's why the policy procedures need to be developed and migrated into a system. So the development of the policy procedures, of course, your employees have to form, you need to form a team within the company, and then those who are in the company who know what are the processes, what are the steps to do a particular activity. Looking at a job description, looking at the department goals, looking at the department process, you can develop SOPs. But of course, somebody needs to vet through to see it covers the best practices in the industry. If it's a warehousing company, what's the best practice in the industry? You have to inculcate the best practice into the procedures, into the policies, to ensure that it meets the legal requirements, i.e. reduce the risk of bribery or eliminate the risk of bribery. So that's the second part, prevention and defense. Prevention and defense is very much mandatory under MACC. Without prevention and defense, you are exposed when there's a raid or when there's an allegation, when there's a charge against the company officers, you are exposed to the law to the maximum, because you can't raise any defense in the court. When MACC raids you and arrests you, and let's say you're a director in charge of the division who was supposed to put in the due diligence, arrest you and charge you, what's the defense you're going to raise? The two defense you can raise is, I didn't know about it, I have nothing to do with it, the officer done it. That's the first defense. Of course, the law says, yes, if you don't know anything about it, fine. What did you do about preventing the risk? What have you done in your department level, at a functional level, at a unit level, at the organizational level? What have you put in place? You have not taken any steps to mitigate the risk. You are exposed to the law. And the punishment is, the judge has no choice but to punish you. You are not giving the judge any bullets to save you. So that the defense is built in this, the law. The law says adequate procedures. What is adequate procedures? The word adequate is anything which meets the requirement. But that again depends on the company, because it must be reasonable and practicable. In a small company, you don't expect 100 procedures. In a large company with about 50,000 staff like Petronas, the expectation is higher, the requirement is higher, the operation level complexity is bigger. But in a small kilang somewhere in Sungai Buloh, you don't expect to have 50 procedures. The operation is, complexity of the operation is much lower. The risk is much lower to happen because it's the operation, the business itself, the framework itself is very contained. So that's a part which is critical in this what you call in implementation and what you call defending yourself under this law. Coming to the monitoring and auditing reporting aspect, as I mentioned, it must be a live system. The policy procedures must be live, i.e. even a code of conduct, code of ethics, the annual pledge must be system driven, not paper driven. So system driven, where you come in once in a year, 2 times a year, when you open your PC, international companies require employees to log in and answer all the questions on code of conduct or conflict of interest. If they answer the code of conduct or conflict of interest questions, 10 questions or 15 questions correctly, and this is tied up to your performance management system. If you don't complete the code of conduct or conflict of interest questions, your performance management system is not closed, which means you don't get your bonus end of the year. That's why the monitoring and reporting system is linked up. The last part of it is awareness and training. This is fundamental because employees always say, I didn't know there's a procedure on this matter. I'm not told, I'm not aware. So you need to ensure that the employees dealing with, especially in the front desk or risk areas, are completely aware of the process and the opportunity for such risk to take place. And what do they also need to know is how do they handle if there is an issue? Because many times employees are what you call in a situation of vacuum. They're not sure what to do. Somebody leaves 10,000 on the table. What do? You chase up the guy to give back the money, or you report it to the boss. You need to have a process in place. Even many companies don't have a procedure how to handle an MACC raid. They panic. Like for the 20th will maybe what you call throw a light. If you have a raid, the employees don't know what to do. It's a crisis, and they don't have a procedure to manage such crises. Who to call, who to report, things like that. These are the policy procedures framework we're talking about, and also the culture of speaking up and handling issues related to whatever you hear, or whatever happens in the company. Of course, it should not be abused. But this is the part I wanted to focus on in terms of what the small and medium enterprises need to do. These 4 areas are the critical areas, and if they are focused on these, it can be done, and it should be done. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Silva. It was an insightful explanation on the laws outside of Malaysia and how it constitutes, how it affects Malaysia by itself. One thing I would like to highlight on the key point that was made in Mr. Silva's presentation, the Section 17 capital A carries an extraterritorial effect. So meaning that if you have a company outside of Malaysia, which has a branch in Malaysia, you're still covered under the Section 17 capital A, right? So even if you're working with an agent, they're directly connected to with, and he bribes a public official outside of Malaysia, you are still going to be bound under Section 17 capital A, because an agent, of course, is a person associated to the company as well. So it was a very, very good explanation that was made that how these laws actually differ from one another. And another thing to highlight is also, we went one step ahead from the UK Bribery Act, because we have jail term for the people on top, not only fines in place. So it's very important to take notice that now not many people will want to simply sit on board directorships without checking whether such adequate procedures are in place at all in the company, right? Also moving forward, I also like to highlight that the adequate procedures is not a one-size-fits-all guideline, like how Mr. Selva has put it. SMEs can also implement adequate procedures at a different scale, right? Public listed companies probably at a different scale because they have many more factories, different branches, parent companies, small subsidiaries. SMEs with small number of employees can also implement adequate procedures, but at a separate scale. Probably have a proper code of conduct in place, just a simple system to monitor. That will be their adequate procedures compared to those of listed companies, right? So, okay, moving forward, I'm sorry because I think we are a bit ahead of time. We should keep some time for the Q&A as well. We took up too much time. So we'll do one short poll before I enter into my part of the presentation. Can we do the poll now? Yeah, and I hope everyone that's still online can participate in this poll. Yep, okay, so you have a question here. Does your company use data analytics to prevent, detect, or respond to bribery or corruption-related conduct? A very simple question. just to know whether we harness the power of analytics. You have about 10 to 30 seconds to answer, and then we'll look at the results. Okay, so we can see that, I mean, we have 23%. That's a good percentage actually to have companies who are using or harnessing the power of analytics to monitor situations within the company. Of course, 51% no, which, and some of you might not be aware of such analytics procedures in place. But it's okay. So I'll go into my short presentation. I won't take too much of your time. Right, okay, just 1 minute now. All right, so my part would be more on harnessing technology to enforce adequate procedures. I mean, Tuan Zee has already mentioned earlier on adequate procedures being used as a defense in case an act of bribery takes place within the organization, all right? We are saying now that you must have proper procedures in place so that you can say that, look, not only I was not aware of what happened, I also took the proper measures in order to prevent my staff from committing such acts, right? And these adequate procedures, maybe it's some companies would say, oh, I don't want to do it because I'm never going to get into trouble. Well, listed companies, it's already a listing requirement for you to have adequate procedures in place and your policies and procedures put up to show in not only for your internal staff, but your external staff as well. Now, how do we enforce adequate procedures? Now, when we first got the guidelines released by GIACC, it was a matter of guidelines or principles that should be put within companies. Now, how can we use technology or harness the power of analytics to enforce all these guidelines, right? Because it's clear within the adequate procedures guidelines that it's not merely putting up a policy and saying that, look, staff, you need to comply with this. And if you find out you're not doing this, you'll be penalized in this way. No, it's not just like that. It's a continuous process. And in order for it to be a continuous process, they need to have proper monitoring mechanism in place. We need to have proper detection mechanisms in place, right? So we talked about top level commitment, like how even Dato' Lee mentioned earlier. Top level commitment is key to have upholding integrity, is key to having proper internal controls move accordingly. With top level commitment, we go to risk assessments. Every company or every industry would have separate risk of bribery and corruption taking place. Separate departments might be higher risk than others. Separate products or transactions being done is higher risk than others. Separate geographical location of branches, higher risk than others, right? So we need to conduct risk assessments to know what are the areas to put our resources into. And when we say put our resources into, put our control measures. And control measures are not manual anymore. We need to harness the power of technology to have financial and non-financial controls automated. Because now we know analytics can add wonders to analytics. We have enormous amount of data being processed every single day. And why not if we can use that data to create proper information that helps us prevent bribery and corruption, that creates proper information for us to detect these activities and prevent them from taking place even further, right? So when we talk about financial, we're talking about, of course, the numbers, right? The transactions taking place, whether we can see certain red flags, certain transactions shouldn't be done, is being done. The non-financial controls is when the numbers are probably right, but you need to look into the documentations. You need to look at the systems. You look at the people in place, where there's any conflicts and whatever not, right? And having proper systems of harnessing technology will be a better way to enforce your anti-bribery and corruption policies, right? So let me give you an example. Can we look at the second slide? Okay. First, we look at structured data. Structured data is basically your numbers, something that is structured for invoices, your transactions, amount of transactions taking place to different vendors. We can look into receivables, your account payables, and whatever not, right? So what analytics can do is detect anomalies. because bribery and corrupt payments are anomalies within the system. All right? We can easily pick out anomalies from accumulation of data. First, we have real-time monitoring, which is a proactive way to monitor your transactions, right? Second, we have ad hoc analytics, which is when a tip has come by or a whistleblower has given a tip or certain transaction or certain vendor doing something corrupt, we go and look in that particular transaction between those parties only, right? So going back to real-time monitoring, what do I mean by real-time monitoring? So take it this way. A manager audit or in audit department probably would come to office every morning and he would get an email with a list of alerts. And when I say list of alerts, he would tell you that, look, yesterday, these were a few transactions that were abnormal from your usual transactions. And it marks red flags of bribery, corruption, for example, right? From the risk assessment you did. It shows probably huge discounts being given to certain parties, huge payments. I mean, we are switching vendors with higher per unit price payments, for example, right? You're favoring different parties and you can view that through your transaction analytics. And when you get these alerts, you can pass it over to your auditors to look whether these alerts are vital enough for you to do further investigation or not, right? So in a real-time basis, you can monitor transactions that are taking place based on the risk assessment that you have done, right? And anomalies that are picked up can be then reviewed and monitored accordingly. Second one, ad hoc. You can even take a transaction. If a tip has come by saying that person A within the company has shares in a vendor's company, so that's why favorable treatment is being done. Products are being sold at a higher price, or huge discounts are being given. All these are forms of gratification, right? So you can then dump transactions for certain years and look at payments that are anomalies. Look at payments that do not make sense to the organization's work. These are means that can be done in a few seconds, right? And there are many softwares out there. This is an example of software known as Forespin. There's many other softwares out there, analytics tools like ACL and whatnot, that can do data analytics very simply. And now you don't even need IT personnel to do the analytics. Even non-IT personnel, finance guys can understand analytics because everything is in the back end itself, right? So moving forward, let's look at the other side. The other side. Yeah. Okay, that was on financial, on structured data, right? On transactions that be taking place in a real-time basis. Now let's look at non-financial controls. Now the big, huge chunk of undertaking internal controls within the adequate procedures is conducting due diligence. Now we can conduct due diligence using a variety of analytics tools out there. There's one tool even like Handshakes and a few others out there that will go through or skim through public domains to look at beneficial ownerships of companies. For instance, we can find out, look, person A who's working in this department is a beneficial owner of a certain company outside, which creates conflict of interest, which could highlight bribery, corrupt payments, and things like that. Now, this can be done at a higher scale. You can even put in family members, different employees. You can do it. You can do continuous monitoring, probably yearly. It could be compared between your staff listing to your vendor listing. You can compare different companies with one another, different individuals with one another, and look at their links. So all these are very crucial when due diligence is done. And like I said, there's two parts to this. First is being proactive, another is reactive. Harnessing data analytics, being proactive will be continuously monitoring these transactions, continuously monitoring due diligence processes being done in companies. A reactive way would be two things. One, when there's a tip received in your whistleblower hotline and you want to investigate deeper. The other would be when there's red flags. Something is not right. Certain accounts are being inflated at manners where even the auditors don't understand. Then you look into it more deeply. Right? Can you go to the last slide? Yeah. So first we talk about, like I said, it's either you take a proactive approach and a reactive approach, because there are many, you can use technology, use analytics to enforce those principles within adequate procedures, right? You don't need to use manual stuff anymore. And knowing that these analytics tools, the costs are going down. There's even subscription basis nowadays, right? Where you can dump data in, where you can continuously monitor transactions, monitor actions. Why I brought this up today was basically because there were many cases where were indicted in the US under the FCPA that was mentioned by Mr. Selva earlier. And many of these cases, a DPA was granted, meaning a deferred prosecution agreement was granted. Now, when a DPA is granted, the company itself will be monitored. Of course, they were given a more lenient punishment, but they'll be monitored on their compliance. And the one way for them to enhance compliance would be to include analytics on an automated basis, to highlight red flags, to get top management to review those red flags on a quarterly basis. So this shows them that they have an automated measure to enhance compliance, automated measure to detect certain anomalies that take place within organizations. If you put this in the essence of ISO ABMS, maybe, which I think will be more highlighted in Puan Nofiza's presentation later, this could be one of the mechanisms you put in place to fulfill the requirements for ISO ABMS. Right now, you have a monitoring system, and you can even have an automated system for due diligence being put in place. Right. So again, I just want to highlight that many companies are not looking into analytics when it comes to enhancing bribery and corruption controls. And it can be automated and put as a continuous review, as a continuous monitoring mechanism to uphold integrity within the organization. All right. So that was just a bit of my presentation. I just wanted to highlight the key technological factors that can be used to enhance adequate procedures and to promote better integrity within organizations. Yes. Okay. So moving forward, because I think we are also running out of time, I will pass it on to Puan Norafiza for her presentation on the ISO ABMS and the initiatives being taken up by Institute Integrity Malaysia. Yeah. So Puan Norafiza, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Raymond. Assalamualaikum and salam sejahtera. First and foremost, I would like to thank MIM for inviting me to be one of the panelists for this webinar. And the topic that I will be covering is on combating corruption for sustainable future. So I think being the last speaker, I will try to summarize all the presentations that have been presented by the earlier panelists, and it really suits my presentation. The key points that I will be highlighting is on first, very important to highlight on the plans and visions that has been established at the national as well as the international level to combat corruption and also to build a sustainable future. Can we have a next slide, please? Okay. And secondly, I will talk about the initiatives that we, all of us, should undertake to combat corruption, the need to use the best available standards, systems, tools, and technologies, as has been mentioned by Raymond just now, blockchain, big data analysis, artificial intelligence, and so on. And you have seen just now, you have listened to Dato that Top Glove is already implementing all this, and that is where that's why it brought Top Glove to where they are now. And all these initiatives are good defense against corporate liability law. Okay, next slide, please. So going back to the basic, what exactly is sustainable future? Sustainable development or a sustainable future is development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of the future generations to meet their needs. So we have been hearing this day after day, and now what are we supposed to do? Okay, next slide, please. Okay, the three pillars of sustainability, as everybody is aware, is economic viability, environmental protection, as well as social equity. And everybody knows that countries with high level of corruption cannot prosper at economic level because corruption leads to uneven distribution of wealth, quality of education and healthcare deteriorates, resources inefficiently allocated, substantial failed projects, and sufferings for the society. Next slide, please. I'm moving very fast. Okay, so in short, corruption is the catalyst for unsustainable future. So why we have to keep on and we have to stand corruption anymore. I have to say this, COVID-19 cannot become a reason that we can corrupt. Change of government cannot become a reason for us to corrupt. Nothing can become a reason for us to corrupt. And I'm glad that the 17A, thank you very much to SPRM and those involved in it, pushing it to be implemented, to be enforced on the 1st of June. Next slide, please. As member states of the United Nations, Malaysia, we adopted United Nations Sustainable Development Goal 2030 in line with this topic, combating corruption for sustainable future. Let's focus on the Sustainable Development Goal number 16, which is on peace, justice, and strong institutions. Next slide. Can we go to the next slide? Okay. Under the, no. Go back one slide. Okay. Under, I'm not controlling that. Okay. So under the goal number 16, there are 12 targets to be achieved by 2030. And we have to focus on target number 5 out of the 12, which is we have to substantially reduce corruption and bribery in all their forms across all countries by 2030. This includes Malaysia. Next slide, please. Okay, so to be in line with this target or goal, Malaysia has already established the National Anti-Corruption Plan. This plan is a 5-year plan from 2019 to 2023. This plan is launched on the 29th of January 2019. The vision of this National Anti-Corruption Plan is towards a corrupt-free nation. It's very simple. And maybe some of us has forgotten about this plan. And for all of your information, this plan is still valid. No matter we have changed governments, this plan is still valid. And we have to ensure that this plan is being implemented. Next slide, please. Okay, the aspiration of the NACP is Malaysia to be known for her integrity and not corruption. I think this aspiration should be valid forever and ever. Next. Next, please. Okay, the National Anti-Corruption Plan has 6 corruption risk areas, which is the public procurement, the law enforcement, political governance, corporate governance, public sector administration, legal and judicial. Due to the limited time, I will just focus on the corporate governance. And I think today all the speakers is mentioning about corporate governance, about 17A, commercial organization. So these are the 6 corruption risk areas. Next slide, please. Okay, so from these 6 risk areas, the plan has already come up with 6 priority areas, 6 strategies, and 115 initiatives. Looking at the corporate governance priority area, inculcating good governance in corporate entity, there are 10 initiatives under it in which all corporate entity has to implement. So we cannot wait anymore. I don't know, actually, we cannot ask other people to implement it for us. We have to implement it because it is our accountability and responsibility to ensure that this plan is implemented. Next. Next. Okay. I'm going to show a little bit about the Corruption Perception Index. TI, Raymond, if there's something wrong, please correct me. This is the 2019 CPI Index by Transparency International. Looking at the commitment, the publication of the National Anti-Corruption Plan, and for your information, as at 31st December 2019, out of the 115 initiatives, 22 initiatives have been completed. And due to that, I think that helps to push our ranking 10 steps above, from level 61 to 51, and scoring from 47 in 2018 to 53. Okay, the Transparency International report recommends that we have to continue to implement all the rest of the initiatives that has been listed if we are to continue to go up and up the rank and to get our score higher and higher. Thanks. Next. Next one, I think, next, can we skip this one? Next slide. Okay. Another vision that I want to share with all of you is on the Shared Prosperity Vision 2030. I'm not so sure how many of you are aware of this, but this Shared Prosperity Vision 2030 was issued on October 2019. Until now, I don't have any good information on what really is the status, but under this Shared Prosperity Vision, there is one, the primary aim of this Shared Prosperity Vision is to provide a decent standard of living to all Malaysians by 2020. It reaffirms Malaysia's continued commitment towards the Sustainable Development Goal 2030, and it strengthens governance through transparency and accountability to foster trust of the rakyat. This is very, very important. So I hope the actions, the initiatives will be available for us to implement. Next slide. Okay, now talking about accountability and responsibility. Board of directors, top management, head of government departments, they have decisive role. They make decision, and their decision is very crucial to support the anti-corruption plan and also the Shared Prosperity Vision 2030. I think we have to focus on this. We don't need another plan. These plans are very comprehensive. They are very good. This plan has been established based on risk assessment. So why reinvent the wheel? So forget about the plan. The plan is there already. So organizations, be it public or private, they are encouraged to adopt sustainable practices in their business strategies, plans, programs to bridge the gap in income and wealth between economic classes, ethnic groups, geographical territories. It is highly unlikely the 17 United Nations Sustainable Development Goals can be met over the next 10 years. We only have another 10 years without private and public sector commitment and participation. Next. So corruption prevention initiatives is very important, as has been mentioned by the previous speakers. We have to use recognized standards, systems, tools, approach like ABMS, CRM, guidelines on adequate procedures. As has been mentioned by Mr. Mutaya just now, it is not a reason if you are small and medium scale industries, you cannot implement all these corruption prevention initiatives. You have to start. The most important now is at least start. Next, please. Next slide. And use the current automation and digitalization technology to facilitate and enhance these corruption prevention initiatives. This is very important considering now we are during the era of COVID-19. So now we are using all this automation, technology, digitalization. We are pushed to use it. So sebenarnya is a blessing in disguise, this COVID-19. Next. Okay, so initiatives corporate entities should undertake, I put four very, very simple one. Introduce integrity vetting requirement as a selection criteria for top management. You can expand it to the middle management, you can expand it to the new recruits, but most important, number one, it must be conducted for top management. as well as board of directors. Secondly, please conduct corruption risk assessment, as has been mentioned by Mr. Mutaya just now, because without the corruption risk assessment, you cannot develop organization anti-corruption plan. Organization anti-corruption plan is a subset of the national anti-corruption plan. So if the country has a national anti-corruption plan, the organization doesn't have an organization anti-corruption plan, the national plan will only become a plan. Thirdly, we have to strengthen anti-corruption awareness programs to build the culture and so on. And fourthly, to implement ISO 37001 anti-bribery management system or any other equivalent preventive management system. Next slide. So in summary, we have the national anti-corruption plan, and above the national anti-corruption plan, we have the SDG, Sustainable Development Goals. To support the national anti-corruption plan, organizations, be it small, medium, large, multinationals, have to establish their own organizational anti-corruption plan. And to support the organizational anti-corruption plan, we have to have the management system, the risk management system, where normally the risk management system will include stock level commitment, risk assessment, control measures, systematic review, training, and so on. And to make it more comprehensive and auditable and certifiable, you can go for anti-bribery management system. Next slide. So why wait? It is better to try and fail than not to try at all, for the sake of our loved ones, the future generations. And my last slide would be a good role model. I think that is all. Thank you very much. I pass it back to Raymond.
Thank you so much, Puan. Okay, all right, so I think we have already run out of time, but we have extended probably about 5 to 10 minutes extra. So because we need to have a few questions for the panelists as well. So we have actually received a huge number of questions. So what will happen is this: I will choose a few for each panelist, and then if there is questions that are not answered, MIM will try their level best to give you an answer. I mean, those anonymous, then probably we can provide our email addresses and you can contact us directly. But those who have provided your names, we can try to connect with you and provide you an email with the answers from the panelists. Right, so we'll do our best. Now, okay, just the first question that we have, I believe this would be targeted towards Tuan J. First one is, will MACC apply Section 17A retrospectively or only for cases that take place after 1st of June? Yeah.
Well, 17A basically, since it's fully in effect only from 1st June 2020, so it will take place as of the date of what do you call its enforcement. So whatever is done before, then it will follow suit the prevalent act or prevalent laws at that point of time.
Okay. Thank you, Tuan J. Okay, another question we'll see is, okay, I'm not going to mention names of those who have asked the question because I'm trying to put them together to see how many people have asked almost a similar question and then frame the question together. So another one would be here. Okay, does Section 17A cover societies for registered under ROS or only companies and so forth? I think towards Tuan J as well.
Well, directly it does not, because if you look at the scope that I showed earlier, it's just under the Companies Act. But that does not discount the fact that it will not be included. As usual, any law goes through a process of evaluation, and they are, just like your just like a mobile service provider, you have top-ups. So even our laws will have top-ups later on. So I'm sure there'll be much more to be included, but that does not mean that societies can now just sit back and say, okay, we are not under the bandwidth, so let's go and do whatever we like. You know, what you call, you may not be under the umbrella of 17A, but please do not forget, you can be under 16, 17, 18, 23, and the many more provisions under the MACC Act. So you may be able to run, you may be able to, you may be able to run, but you cannot hide, right? So there'll be other things as well.
Yeah.
So
thank you so much. Yeah.
The most important thing here, Raymond, I think, you know, regardless of whether you are an association, whether you're a statutory body, whether you're a business organization or not, the main purpose here of 17A is actually to build a culture of integrity in the business environment. Now, that is something very important, and prevention is always better than cure. And the main thing here is to enhance the element of business integrity, to enhance integrity as a holistic approach, whether it's business, whether it's office, whether it's anywhere. See, if you go back to, Wawasan 2020, basically it says, I think, if I'm not mistaken, it's item number 4, what do you call the Wawasan number 4, which says it is to build a society that is imbued with high moral values. And that's what 17A is actually contributing to, that bigger picture of Malaysia being a very high, a society of high moral values, our officers following a very high level of compliance and governance, our business community actually integrating integrity and integrating human values, and integrating business values and what we call anti-corruption, basically into their what we call DNA, and and that's when you get a nation which is basically coming up. You get a integrity nation. Integrity nation does not only lie in policies and documents. It is to be prevalent in every layer of society.
Yeah.
Right from general society to very specific societies, such as business communities and all that. So, one should not take it as, okay, since there is no provision now, so I'm free to do whatever I want. No, I think everyone should get ready. Everyone should just put it in place. It's just like a vitamin. A vitamin never harms. It's only good for you, but it does not say that, you don't have, you are not experiencing heart attack, so you are not, you are sort of immune to heart attack. It can come at any time, but prevention is better than cure. So it's about upkeeping yourself, looking after your own personal health, the health of the organization, the health of stakeholders, the health of the business environment, and so on and so forth. So the spirit of 17A, I will reiterate again, is very much preventive and to encourage what you call these various anti-corruption plans, frameworks, and so on and so forth to be sort of instilled and plugged into the DNA of all organizations.
Thank you, Tuan J. Yeah, true. Like you said, prevention is better than cure. And the main objective here is to uphold integrity and not for MEC to come after people and take punitive action in any way. Right, okay, so moving forward, we have a question for Dato' Lee actually. Dato' Lee, yeah, okay. So this one here mentions, in Top Glove, Dato' mentioned that Top Glove outsourced the whistleblower matters to a third party. Based on your experience, is it good in terms of getting the response from public or from internal staff as compared to the conduct if the whistleblower the department to whistleblower to is in the organization itself? Is it better to have an external party to control the whistleblower program? Yeah.
Yes. Yes, Raymond. I look at it this way: whichever sources it come from, any whistleblowing is most welcome. So for cases whereby the internal staff, some of them are not comfortable to going through the internal way, they might like to go through the external way. And likewise, for external party, they are not comfortable to go through the external source, can also go through the internal source. So I think it is an option for the people out there, whether internal or outside parties, to have this option so that they could choose whichever is more appropriate, whichever they feel would be best able to address their grievances or to address the observations that they have noted. And these are good people that want actions to be taken. Invariably, sometimes we do get some surat layang, we do get some untrue allegations, but all are welcome. We investigate each and every one of them thoroughly and left no stones unturned. And I think most importantly, I agree one of the panel speakers to say that you need to take action in every of these cases, because do not adopt an attitude of tidak apa, biarkan saja, because if we do that, we will basically regress in our society. And I wish that Malaysia could one day be like Korea, whereby they put ex-presidents to jail, they investigate the top CEO of Samsung, you know, they take a lot of actions, and that is what I call a true mark of a society that value and practice anti-corruption.
Thank you so much, Dato' Lee. That really clears the air on this. Can I also ask another? Yes. Sure.
See, one area of whistleblowing, part of whistleblowing procedure, basically that everybody has to pay attention is the element of protection and confidentiality of the information and the informer. Now, what do you call? I'm not too sure about, I'm sorry, Dato', I got to comment on this because in my various other comments, I know of various other organizations that have opted such direction. Now, of course, in Malaysia, we have a Whistleblowing Protection Act, whereby there are 8 agencies, there are 8 bodies that are entrusted with receiving any form of whistleblowing information with regards to any misconduct. And the public can go to any of these agencies. They are, for example, what do you call, MACC, police, immigration, bank negara, SSM, and a few others. Now, there are 8 bodies there. Now, what you call, all information is held very, very highly confidential. And of course, the element of protection must be very, very, very clear. Now, the other thing about external parties, other than what you call the internal organization, as well as these 8, what you call the 8 bodies that are entrusted with receiving whistleblowing information, and providing what you call whistleblowing protection to a whistleblower, is that number one, how much of protection is the whistleblowing manager or the company that is managing that whistleblowing is offering, number one. Number two, in terms of legality, I think Mr. Selvaraja could also chip in here by saying, their role later on, should a case pop up due to whistleblowing, then their role, so in terms of, how are they going to process that particular information, and there are also legal, there are some legalities with regards to, first information report and so on and so forth. So these are some of the things that, I hope that, many sort of consultants or many organizations that jump into the bandwagon and offer an external source of whistleblowing platform, don't do it out of a fame kind of a thing, but actually look into these various legalities. Should check with the, with their legal persons, as well as, maybe even enforcement agencies and so on and so forth, to see that actually later on that the information that has been provided does not backfire, and becomes, something that is stale and cannot be used in the court of law. So these are some of the things that must be, very much looked into and actually detailed out, and to see, so that whatever information later qualifies, at least, to initiate investigation and prosecution. And so on.
Yeah.
Yep, very well said, Tuan J. Yeah.
Sorry, then I have one question actually on this. If incident is reported to management in the company, and the employee finds that the management did not take action, so now he goes and complains to the 8 agencies or 7 agencies that you mentioned earlier in the Whistleblower Protection Act. Are they still given the protection? Because in the Act, it states that you do not get protection if you already whistleblow to another party. So how do you clarify that?
That we will see on the nature of it. Of course, so this some possible special cases, and we will look on a case-to-case basis. It's not one size that fits all. Each case is handled very differently. Each whistleblower and the information received is handled differently. But of course, in general, what it means by that of what you call disclosing the information is, for example, if you take an information, you go and whistleblow, and next thing you end up publicizing it, and creating a soap opera on your Facebook and YouTube and Instagram and Twitter. And
trumpet.
yeah. Not only you blow trumpet, you blow a whole full orchestra, make a whole few Mozarts out of it and all that. Now that is something which will disqualify you as a whistleblower.
Understood. Yeah.
So the information has to be kept. You see, because otherwise, you would be, sort of hampering all leads to that particular investigation.
Tuanjay, only one point on this whistleblower. Most of the international companies try to reduce the whistleblowing issue because it brings a reputation issue to the company. So how do they reduce the whistleblowing? Is to enhance the policy procedures, reduce the discretions, reduce the opportunity for corrupt activities. The lesser the chances for corrupt activities, taking away as much discretion as possible through clear levels of authority, line of visibility, levels of financial controls. If you have all these line of visibility, levels of financial control very clearly set out in your policies, the chance for a whistleblower becomes lesser. And whistleblower is not good because it is very reactive, very negative to the company. So that's the reason why international companies, they have whistleblowing hotline. All of them have it. It's connected to the audit department or the internal affairs department. But they encourage not to have as much whistleblower through clarity in the procedures and processes. This is where best practices have come. I mentioned best practices.
Yeah.
If you adopt best practices, the chances for abuse is very little. And that's why we encourage management principles and best practices to be adopted through global well-known practices through MIM, so that we can enhance ourselves into a developed process rather than copying some unknown practices and get into trouble.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Silva. Okay, last question that I can only take. The others will be answered by our panel, and somehow MIM will keep contact with you to get to it. One is for Puan, actually, Puan Rafiza, being from the auditor background. So now internal auditors are actually concerned about what are the key areas they should look into when it comes to analyzing adequate procedures. Because number one, we don't even know how adequate is adequate procedures. I mean, it's judgmental in a sense. So how do internal auditors play a role, and what are the key areas to assess? Yeah.
Okay, being an internal auditor, to look into corruption risk, actually the most important thing is the internal auditors must be able to judge the risk of corruption in the organization. If the internal auditor doesn't know what is the corruption risk, which one is high, which one is low, which one is medium, forget it. So in this case, the competency of the internal auditors, you can use the existing internal auditors, the group internal auditors that you have for the business, but you have to train them to be able to identify first what are the corruption risks in the organization, whether the current enterprise risk management that they have put in place is adequate to highlight the corruption risk, and whether the action that has been taken is can reduce the risk to the level that is as low as possible. So that is the key thing. The rest I cannot elaborate. But the most important thing, the competency of the auditors. So if the auditors doesn't have the competency, you can get external auditor that has the competency to close the gap. So that the audit will be effective.
Yeah, thank you, Puan. I think it's also mentioned in the Etiquette Procedures Guidelines that you can get an ISO 3701 auditor to come on board to audit your process procedures every 3 years or something like that.
Can.
Yeah.
Actually, it's not necessary. If you can also ask the certification bodies to conduct the audit on your behalf, not for certification, just for the conduct of the audit. Yeah, not necessary. Certification body will come just to give you certificate, audit for certification. They can come just to do gap analysis ataupun to check your status.
All right. Thank you so much, all panelists. I think it was an awesome session, good discussion. If we had more time, it'd be great. But we will try to get back to you with questions if possible. And of course, we will have an advanced section if permitted. So thank you so much. Now I'll pass back the floor to Mr. Siva. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Raymond, and the distinguished panelists. And I want to thank everybody for staying back. You know, I know it has crossed over the time that has been allocated. My apologies, but I have asked in the chat group. I think many of them would like to have a follow-up session. And those of you who have stayed on, I think we have got close to about 300 over participants who are still with us until now. Thank you so much. And before we go, I'd like to express my appreciation and gratitude to Dato' Lee. Thank you for sharing. I think there were great insights that you shared.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Company, right? And Puan Afisa, thank you very much. Tuan Jayanta, you have a lot of questions to answer after this. And Mr. Selva for bringing some insights. And Raymond, thank you for, you tried your best to get all the questions in.
Yes, thank you so much.
What we will be doing is, let me assure you that all the questions, we will discuss with the panelists and we will respond as long as your name is there. So it is our responsibility as corporate leaders to ensure that our organization is compliant to the provisions of the Act. And as one of the participants, Vivian said, we must continue to go up the integrity ranks, in terms of integrity, truth, and righteousness must be held at all times. Right. So with that, I want to end this session and thank you. If you want to find more of these sessions, please get into our MIM website. We will be having our weekly webinars and wish you all the best and have a great weekend. Thank you so much.
Thank you.